Bring in show music, please.
Today on Squawk Pod, devastation from Hurricane Helene hits North Carolina, getting the local perspective on the ground from Asheville Mayor Esther Manheimer.
The pictures don't fully capture the catastrophic damage that we've experienced here in Asheville. It's unprecedented.
Voting on your phone? Venture capitalist Bradley Tusk on his call to make voting easier and more secure.
I bet every one of your viewers right now has a smartphone. I bet 98% of them don't vote in state and local primaries, and I bet half of them probably would if they could do it easily and securely.
Plus, Asian stocks wild ride, live from Amazon Prime, it's election night, and California's governor vetoes the first possible artificial intelligence legislation.
When people say quote-unquote guardrails, what does that actually even mean?
My inclination is just roll the dice, I guess.
It's Monday, September 30th. Squawk Pod begins right now.
Stand Becky by in 3, 2, 1. Cue it, please.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Squawk Box right here on CNBC. We're live from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Becky Quick, along with Joe Kernan and Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Let's talk about what's happening in China because stocks there are surging again. The CSI 300 jumping by 8.5%, marking the best day in 16 years. China's officials there Purchasing Managers Index reading for September indicated the fifth straight month of contraction for the manufacturing sector, but came in above economists' expectations. In the past week, since the government began announcing stimulus measures, the CSI 300 is up 25%. The Shanghai Composite's up 21%, and the Hang Seng up 16%. This is the only trading day of the week for markets on the mainland before closing for the Golden Week holiday for the rest of the week. So Mr. Tepper is having a good day, or a good week. Both.
Definitely. We'll see how long it lasts. But and this was also part of the thesis. The Nikkei, the Japan's Nikkei, plunging in the first trading session after it elected a new prime minister. You may remember Nikkei futures plunged on Friday after the market closed when election results came in. Separately, industrial production data for August dropped by 4.9% from the year-ago period, a much steeper decline than analysts or economists had expected. And Japan's August retail sales, though, did come in above expectations.
Meantime, yesterday, California Governor Gavin Newsom vetoed a controversial AI safety bill. Now, advocates for that bill said that the legislation was necessary to protect the public before AI becomes uncontrollable, but some in the tech industry were raising objections, saying it could drive AI companies from the state and hinder innovation. In vetoing the bill, Governor Newsom said that the bill does not take into account whether an AI system is deployed in high-risk environments involving critical decision-making or the use of sensitive data. Newsom said he had asked leading experts on generative AI to help the state develop, quote, workable guardrails. So this is not going away. And by the way, may get reintroduced in a different way in California anyway. Perhaps with some of those other issues that Gavin Newsom was suggesting. So the game is not over yet.
What do you think of this as somebody who follows AI so closely? And there have been calls for guardrails all the way along. I know it's tough at a state level to do some of these things, but nobody else seems to be stepping up at this point.
Well, I think at the state level, the issue is if you do it in California, I don't think it necessarily sends people out of California per se. It sends just a signal about what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. It just means that every state, like everything else, you're going to have to do a hodgepodge of things.
It's just that usually federal stuff actually sometimes can be spurred by state.
And then the other question is just when people say quote unquote guardrails, what does that actually even mean? And that's sort of a lot of this is sort of philosophical. It's sort of practically like what would the guideline actually do and how would you really implement it?
I mean, to be forced to turn your plan into the state AG seems a little silly, and it's not like the state AG is going to be able to go through it and say this makes sense or doesn't from a technical perspective. But the idea of being
the Chinese
held liable,
do it.
Yeah, to be held liable for it, it does seem like it would have some teeth in it. If anything goes wrong later down the road, if you're held liable for that.
Well, this is, we had talked to the author Yuval Harari, who wrote the book Nexus, and he calls for a true liability, kind of like a Section 230. But for AI, and whatever AI spits out back out at you, that you would be liable completely for it. It's an interesting question because.
But Section 230 means you're not.
I'm sorry. It would be the opposite. It would be the opposite of Section 230, and therefore, I don't know. I mean, there's some people who say, look, it's a tool, and depending on how the person uses a tool, how are we supposed to think about that? Right?
When you see,
if I give you a hammer, and
I thought it was just for the direct models that they created.
what historical precedent do we have where regulation keeps up with breakneck
None.
technology?
And look at the problems that we've had as a result.
If you
Section
even
230
look at even like crypto, they're like so far behind. It's already there, and then you think, how much success have we had? If you were going to regulate anything for our kids, it would be social media.
Yes,
and
that's what I mean.
So how can we possibly expect that AI? Talk about how quickly it's growing. This is exponential.
Right. No, this one's exponential,
and there's no way to keep up with it. I don't have a high degree of confidence. I think it's going to be totally the wild west.
Liable for what you create in that.
Are you with social media?
You should be. I think 230 should be.
It's not going to happen.
Section 230 should never.
Maybe it
exist.
happens. I don't know. Right.
I understand at the time they were looking to try and promote and make the industry vibrant and young when you were looking at technology, but the idea that it's protected today seems insane.
I think
if you had Section 230 today, you'd have a lot. You talk about free speech, you would have a lot less.
My inclination is just roll the dice, I guess. I mean, if you're not regulating biotech, you get COVID. If you're not regulating, and we don't even regulate life and death things, so this is not.
Elon Musk and others have pointed to AI being the potential of what we had with the nuclear bomb being invented.
Yeah,
and there were.
That'll probably get us first, or highly transmissible Ebola will get us first, because they're still working on that crap with no oversight.
Then there's the question on the other side of who. I think, Joe, we don't normally agree on everything. I'm kind of agreeing with you. I don't know what.
Well, you don't want to do TikTok either.
I don't know how. I don't want to do TikTok. I don't know how you would regulate. I mean, I don't know who you would hire that would actually be able to do this.
Yeah.
And by the way, every regulator who seems to touch anything doesn't seem to understand the dynamics of the technology. We're going to hear, I think, probably later today about this DirecTV Dish deal. That's a deal that probably should have been done years ago, but nobody thought to themselves that Elon Musk is going to show up with Starlink, and Amazon's going to invest in Kuiper. And all of a sudden, we're going to have satellites that are going to basically take these businesses out eventually.
I agree with you. That's what bothers me. The idea of an AG saying, okay, I'm going to sign off on all your plans. That seems silly. But the idea that you would be held liable for things that you unleash, maybe there's some sense to that.
Veteran NBC News and MSNBC anchor Brian Williams is in late-stage talks to host a live election night special on Amazon Prime Video. If it happens, it would mark the first entry into news-related program by the streaming service. Multiple reports saying that the aim of the program would be a nonpartisan discussion of the evening's news. And as we know, Netflix and others have tried to avoid news programming in large part because, I don't know if you remember, but Netflix had issues in the Middle East and other places and was always worried about the kinds of issues that would create, on top of all of the other issues that politics in the United States creates with former President Trump and others who have, criticized news channels and their owners. Disney has suffered this most recently with this last debate, and others. What that means. By the way, Amazon's taken.
Bezos owns Washington Post, so.
And by the way, Amazon has taken a hit for that as well. It'll be interesting if they. My understanding, and I talked to a bunch of people about it over the weekend, is can they get into the eventizing business? This is an event.
Oh, yeah, news events.
News events. One-off news events.
I thought you meant like hosting conferences.
No. And the question is whether a night like this, people are not used to watching election coverage on a streamer yet. But there's lots of people who don't have access anymore to networks. And so are there people who will just click on this instead? The other thing that's kind of fascinating is everybody who's an Amazon customer will hit that app likely that day. And just like where you get Amazon Prime, or sometimes they'll
pop it up for you.
Now sometimes even announce football. If you ever look on Thursday nights, they have massive ads. I mean, that is super powerful. And then the last piece of it, which is fascinating, is the global nature of it. So if you are not in the United States and you want to follow what's going on in the U.S. elections that evening, this is going to be an interesting one to watch. So I'm fascinated by it all.
I don't know why he's doing great on the show at 11. I don't know. What happened? He's disappeared again, right, Brian?
Yeah.
He's a funny guy. He could do stand-up.
Very funny guy.
Very funny.
Cheese will be next.
Coming up,
This could end up as a top 5 or maybe even a top 3 hurricane in terms of extent and scope.
Hurricane Helene brings historic flooding to the southeast. We hear from the mayor of Asheville, North Carolina.
It's exceeded any historic storm on record. We've had the combination of incredible flooding and also damage due to winds, down trees. No neighborhood has been spared.
And former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate on how to pay for these communities to rebuild.
The housing losses are going to be staggering, and without insurance to rebuild, it's going to be very difficult for folks to get back to where they were without significant federal assistance.
Squawk Pod will be back after this. This is Squawk Pod. Here's Becky Quick.
Welcome back, everybody. Hurricane Helene ravaging communities across the southeastern United States late last week and over the weekend. At least 88 people have died as a result of that storm, and officials say that number is likely to rise. Very hard to track people down, be able to get a hold of them. Officials say that there are more than 2 million people without electricity across several states still. You're also talking about millions of people who don't have cell phone or phone service to be able to get communication out. There are lots of roads that remain closed, many in North and South Carolina, and that's been hampering the delivery of much needed supplies. For some cutoff communities, that meant airdrop supplies yesterday. But if you've been seeing the pictures, the damage, the video of what took place, this was completely unexpected in areas that were hundreds of miles inland. There were drought conditions, and when the massive amounts of rain fell, you saw huge mudslides and damage everywhere, dams that were threatened on some of these issues, and really things that they have not seen in our lifetimes in some of these areas. We're going to talk a lot more about that. Contessa Brewer joins us right now with a closer look at the extent of the damage. And Contessa, what we've seen so far has been unbelievable.
I mean, the pictures alone are jaw-dropping. And then you think, this is so widespread that I'm being told this could end up as a top 5 or maybe even a top 3 hurricane in terms of extent and scope. But AccuWeather's out with a jaw-dropping early estimate between $95 billion and $110 billion. The impact on infrastructure, severe. Hundreds of roads, including interstate highways, washed away or buried in landslides, dams overtopping on the brink of failure. Millions of people lost electricity, and Georgia Power calls it the worst hurricane in the company's history. Most of the damage is the result of flooding. We saw record-breaking storm surges around Tampa and elsewhere on Florida's Gulf Coast, and drenching rain that inundated mountain towns and inland cities that traditionally don't brace for hurricane impact. Property insurance will not cover damage from flooding. The Insurance Information Institute told me in most of the hardest hit places, fewer than 1% of properties have flood insurance. Guy Carpenter generated this map using data from the National Flood Insurance Program to illustrate how few flood insurance policies are in effect. Let me explain it. Everything that you're looking at in the center that is tan, so only the coastal areas which are blue, everything that's tan is less than 2% coverage with flood insurance. The exception, of course, about what gets covered is in auto insurance. If you have a comprehensive policy, it covers the flood damage. I did reach out to Allstate, which says it's just too early to have a handle on the scope of impact, but that their mobile units are now heading to multiple states to facilitate incoming claims. Other experts tell me that the sheer geographic enormity of Helene's damage illustrates how changing weather patterns are keeping the underwriters guessing. Then I had a late conversation last night with the CEO of Neptune Flood Insurance. It's the second largest flood insurer after the National Flood Insurance Program. And he said to me, look, this is the worst damage I've ever seen. He said, well, you're about to see home values, real estate values in Florida plummet. Why? Because they're not insured. People are living on fixed income, but their homes were paid off. They opted not to have insurance. And so what happens is they're going to need the cash. They'll sell the land for whatever they can get for it and then go find something else. My expectation is that this is going to make the housing crisis that we already are seeing much, much worse. Because if you look at a place like Asheville, which has been listed as a place to go and retire, an amazing place. You could get a lot for your money. You have people going there and losing their homes and not having insurance for it. And then what? So the pressure on labor, the pressure on materials right now, you're going to have a mad dash for crews to go in and try to repair, plus the infrastructure.
Just the idea of how you put these pieces back together. I mean, if you've ever been around a flood area after a hurricane, you know it can take a year and a half. This is such a widespread area. This is going to take years to try and rebuild. If you're looking at Asheville in particular, every road in and out, the major interstates getting in and out, all of them shut down. They can't get help in at this point because of the road shut down, because there's no gasoline there, because there's no electricity. Even the people who are coming trying to fix and help things can't.
And by the way, we're still seeing the rain effects. You're still seeing that large swath of storms back now over Virginia, parts of northern Virginia. So you might see still, because of the inundating rainfall, and forecasters looking toward a very active Gulf, and that there may be other storms forming there. I have to just say that this is, I mean, we're really looking at the port strike and all of that to come. All of this along the upper East Coast and up through the South is about to be a huge mess. Interstate highways that are shut down, they're working rapidly to try and get these roads back open. But until that happens, people are really in dire straits.
Yeah, you hear some horrible stories. We're going to continue to talk about this today. Contessa, thank you. Joining us right now on the phone is Esther Manheimer. She is the mayor of Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville has a population of a little under 100,000 people and is, of course, known for its art scene. The county that the city is in has reported at least 30 deaths related to Helene. And Mayor, thank you for being here in this difficult time. The pictures that have come out, the video that's come out has been horrifying. You've seen it firsthand. Can you tell us where things stand right now?
Well, I will say that the pictures don't fully capture the catastrophic damage that we've experienced here in Asheville. It's unprecedented. It's exceeded any historic storm on record. We've had the combination of incredible flooding and also damage due to winds, down trees. No neighborhood has been spared. The power and water is out, and we're entering a desperate situation.
Have you even been able to locate all of the people in need or find out exactly who's missing at this point?
So no, there are still areas of our county that cannot be accessed because roads were washed out. And making matters even more complicated is that we do not have communication. So people can't just pull out a cell phone and contact one another. You see all kinds of folks that are putting out messages who do have the ability to do so, saying, I haven't heard from my mother, I haven't heard from my brother, I need to make contact with them. And that is still an ongoing situation. The only reason I'm even able to talk to you is because I'm in downtown where there is power and some Wi-Fi service. But otherwise, just if you can think about a challenge, we are experiencing it right now.
Every major road, interstate, highway into Asheville has been damaged and is considered impassable by the authorities. How is help getting to you? What could you most use?
So we do have I-26 that runs down out of Asheville into South Carolina has been opened. So we can receive assistance that way. Also, we are receiving some assistance that's being flown into the airport. So we do have the ability, not the best, because 3 out of 4 major highways into the city are blocked due to landslides or washouts. And so it is challenging to get assistance in here. We are still waiting for the majority of what we need being water and food. And that is a challenge to get those resources in here. And we're desperately in need of that, and we're waiting for that. We are going to have the governor of the state of North Carolina here today, according to what he's been able to tell me. He will be here with his team at around mid-afternoon.
Mayor, I'm not sure for anybody who hasn't been following closely, they realize this is not just Asheville. This is North Carolina, western North Carolina, a huge area that spans probably about 11,750 square miles at this point. Millions of people. That's an area the size of Massachusetts. It's surrounding states like Tennessee and Atlanta. What would help? People out there want to help. What would you suggest they do? Are there organizations you would suggest they give to? Or I take it you don't want people driving straight into town.
Right. We do need to coordinate with any major organization that's coming in to help. Of course, we have the Red Cross here, and there are other large organizations that are coordinating to provide assistance. That's obviously taking some time. The governor has asked for folks to donate to the North Carolina Disaster Relief Fund, and that's at nc.gov/donate. So that is a way to help with resources that we're in dire need of. So if folks want to help in that way, locally, I want to tell you, I have seen amazing things from people here in our community helping one another. Pooling resources in neighborhoods, making sure to check on neighbors, trying to make sure that elderly neighbors are checked on, that someone's bringing them water to be able to do basic things like flush their toilets and have drinking water. It's truly amazing. And over and above that, our first responders are doing an incredible job. They are several days into this now, and they are nonstop. And we have support from outside organizations, other fire departments sending us resources, the federal government as well. So it's all hands on deck, and it is a well-coordinated effort, but it is so enormous. I can't even describe to you. And as the rivers recede and you can see all of the debris, people's homes in the river just decimated, cars overturned, it's hard to understand the scope of what it will take to go through and check every part of our community and make sure, unfortunately, deceased folks have been recovered, that folks who are alive but cut off have resources and are reestablished with contact.
Mayor Manheimer, we are so sorry to see what you all are dealing with there, the fallout from all of this. We wish you well in continuing with this efforts at this point. And again, for anyone who is looking to help, as she mentioned, the governor there has asked people donate to nc.gov/donate. Mayor Manheimer from Asheville, North Carolina, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. With more on the recovery efforts from Helene, former FEMA Administrator Craig Fugate. Right now, what are the most important things that we should be doing, Craig?
Well, right now it's still a response, and I think that's, it's hard for people to start talking about recovery when you still haven't even gotten to some areas. But all of this is going to be based upon getting in, as the mayor pointed out, you got to get that critical infrastructure, particularly that water system. You can ship a lot of water in, but until that system's up, it's hard to get to the next steps. Another key thing is, if you're not part of an organization, I think the governor and everybody else would tell you, just give them time. Don't try to get in there. Give generously to those organizations, as they pointed out, North Carolina Recovery. Money is your best way to help right now. And if you aren't able to make contact with family, there's a lot of things that North Carolina has information on their website, how to find out or get information about what's going on. Communications is going to be very spotty, but I would caution people, there's a lot of people missing. That's not unusual when communication is out. It doesn't mean that everybody, we've lost that many people. Unfortunately, they're going to find more fatalities as they go in these areas. But communications will be a huge piece of letting people make contact, let people know they're okay.
We've been hearing about the sort of the intersection of private insurance and then federal flood insurance. Do we have a solution in sight? And I think the property and casualty insurance market had been stabilizing until this event. Now all bets are off again.
Well, I think this will be, as we get into the next couple of weeks to the next month, it's going to be a huge issue of how many people did not have flood insurance that had flood damage and find out that their homeowner's policy will not cover that. This is a huge issue for the nation. We're seeing more and more extreme rain events that are flooding well outside of what's called the special flood hazard area. And that's really an insurance rate map. So a lot of people don't think they're in a flood zone, but in these extreme rainfall events, there are areas that have never seen water that are flooding. And because they don't have insurance, it's going to slow down recovery. It's also going to mean that the federal government is going to have to spend more money to help these communities recover. FEMA's programs will not make these folks whole. That's really, that emergency response. I think we're going to have Congress look at the needs in all of the states that have been hit, particularly HUD, community block disaster grant dollars to help these communities rebuild, because the housing losses are going to be staggering. And without insurance to rebuild, it's going to be very difficult for folks to get back to where they were without significant federal assistance.
The whole idea of insurance is to spread the risk around. We even see insurance companies, then they go and reinsure the insurance that they write. There's a way to do this in terms of indemnity. Who needs to get involved if the private companies don't? It seems like it's something that Congress would have to do.
Well, that was the origin of the federal flood insurance program, because the insurance industry, after major floods back in the 60s, began to back out of that market and left it open. So the federal government stepped in. I think there are other ways to do this, perhaps looking at federal reinsurance when the reinsurance markets cannot be affordable. The other problem is, as I'm in Florida, our insurance rates are sky high, even if you can get insurance, is the market's reacting to the increasing number of disasters. And we have not quite found the balance between how and where we build to what's insurable risk, what the markets could afford. So if we're not going to change how and where we build, I'm afraid that the federal taxpayer is going to have to assume more of this burden.
Well, we got plenty of federal taxpayer. We don't want to spend, obviously, but there's a way to do it. And we know what our yearly expenses are, that as a percentage of GDP. There's definitely enough there if it's handled properly to cover this, I think, Craig. But we appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Next on Squawk Pod, could we revolutionize democracy and voting if Americans could vote via smartphone? Tech entrepreneur Bradley Tusk says the time has come.
Let's start small. School board elections, city council elections. I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin is not that interested in the Queensboro president election.
Only because I've got like 15 mobile devices.
Welcome back to Squawk Pod.
Up and Andrew, Q.
You're watching Squawk Box right here on CNBC. I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin, along with Joe Kernan and Becky Quick. We're just a little over a month away now from the election. Our next guest making an interesting pitch for mobile voting in the elections to come. Joining us right now is Tusk Ventures CEO Bradley Tusk. His new book, Vote with Your Phone, Why Mobile Voting is Our Final Shot at Saving Democracy. It is out now.
It is.
It's a provocative idea. A lot of people have been talking for a very long time about how this could one day be the way we do this. Of course, this and has also been one of the great worries about whether people would believe in the democracy and whether they'd believe in the vote. So what say you?
So I would say this. I think we would all agree that politicians basically make decisions based on the next election, right? It's fair to say. And we would agree that because of gerrymandering, basically primaries are the election that really matters. And just as a fact, primary turnout's about 10 to 15%. So who is that? It's the far left, it's the far right, or it's big special interests, whether it's the NRA or teachers unions or whoever. And they dictate not only who wins our elections, but then ultimately what those people do once they're in office, because all they want to do is make sure they win the next primary, which means keep the base happy and keep the special interests happy. And so we're always going to be in a world where either we have the total dysfunction and chaos of D.C. or totally one-sided government, whether it's state of Texas on the right or city of San Francisco on the left. And the only solution is you got to change the underlying incentives and inputs and significantly increase turnout to move politicians to the middle.
Okay, so but the question is, with Russia and Iran and China apparently all very interested in the outcome of our election and willing to do things that are completely and utterly untoward, how much would you worry that we would all be voting here? And so the great news is everybody's voting, but then all of a sudden, even if the Iranians or the Chinese or the Russians don't really get in, but the speculation gets out there that they have, that people don't believe in the vote, which is what we have even right now.
I was about to say, first of all, I'm not sure that we can be much worse than the status quo. But even putting that aside, a few things. One is, so we've been building technology according to the recommendation of the U.S. Vote Foundation that is end-to-end encrypted, end-to-end verifiable, multi-factor authentication, biometric screening, open source, it's air-gapped, and this is all philanthropic. I've paid for this all myself out of my foundation. We're going to make it free and open source to anyone who wants to use it. So number one, I would argue it's far more secure than the existing voting technologies where mail trucks get lost and polling places get shut down and things like that. But beyond that, my argument is let's start small. School board elections, city council elections. I'm pretty sure Vladimir Putin is not that interested in the Queensboro president election.
Only because I've got like 15 mobile devices.
Yeah, so here's how it works. So you would, let's just use New York City because we're sitting here. You download the app from the New York City Board of Elections. And the first thing they would say, okay, is Becky a registered voter in New York City? You determine that. Then is Becky really Becky? So there's multi-factor authentication like you would get from Google or Amazon or anyone else.
Which I have to show my driver's license or what?
Well, first thing is you just have to be able to show that you're even from your device, which is why, just in the way that any website will text you a number. Then it could be driver's license, it could be biometric screening, fingerprints, iris, a lot like Clear at the airport. To determine you're Becky.
So more than if I even showed up at a polling.
Yeah.
And this goes back to then the whole idea that people don't want to ID anybody.
Well, you're going to have to make some choices between having an app that people have confidence in to get more turnout and rules around that. I absolutely agree. I certainly prefer that we use biometric screening because then we know that you're you. The ballot pops up on screen. You make all your choices. Because it's digital, we don't have to worry about hanging chads or stray pencil
I'm cool with
marks.
That, but I don't want you to have my biometrics.
Well, you don't have to vote this way.
Yeah,
so
I would
look,
go into the
you don't use Clear at the airport or TSA or any of that stuff.
I'd rather go.
You just wait in the really long line.
No, I fly often enough that I only fly United, and I'm 1K there. So.
Okay, fine. So look, there's a lot of people. Like for example, I dropped my daughter off at college about a month ago. Yeah. She's never going to do absentee ballots. She's never going to go somewhere. She has checked her, assuming she were awake right now, which I'm sure she's not, but if she were, she will have already checked her phone 5 times.
But would you worry about biometrics getting hacked at some point?
No, because you're using biometrics to get into your phone all day, every day. It's the same thing. You might not be, but the vast majority of people are. And to the point is, let's meet people where they are. If younger people or people deployed military or people with disabilities for whom voting is difficult want to be able to vote on their phone, let's let them do it. For you, go wait in line, wherever you want.
There's going to be an argument that some people don't have a phone.
So 97%, according to Pew, 97% of American adults under the age of 50 have a phone. 76% over the age of 65. Well, keep all the forms we have. No one's arguing to get rid of it. But if you said, look, we're going to have mail-in, I would argue every state should have mail-in and in-person voting and mobile voting, and let's get as many people voting as possible.
For more than you have at the polling station.
For sure.
Let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
There's two other issues that relate to this. One is whether the government or somebody will be able to track your vote. So one of the things that happens now is it's very, very difficult. You go into the voting booth, and that's supposed to be between you and your vote, and that's it. And because it's on paper and you walk out, it's very hard for people to realize what's going on.
Right. So this is exactly like...
This is something that scares people.
Right. So the way we've built it, it's exactly like a mail-in ballot, which is once it hits the election office, it's encrypted. They don't decrypt it till they take it offline and air gap it, so it's not even accessible to the internet. Then they print out a paper copy. The copy they print out when they decrypt it has no identifying markers at all. It just gets mixed in with all the other ballots. So it's just like if you mailed in a ballot, it would have your return address on it, but they have no way to know you.
This goes back to the IDing issue, which is obviously there's a huge debate in this country about IDing people and whether that actually prevents people from actually voting.
Well,
your argument is that because more people have phones,
it
by the way, overcomes that issue.
It's a false argument, because the argument right now would be, hey, let's either have no security requirements because we want a lot of people to vote, or really strict security requirements to make it hard to vote. Let's make it really easy to vote, and let's make sure that you're you. That's what we should be doing.
Okay, can I try out an idea on you?
Please.
That I've been playing with for probably 15 years.
Okay.
It's a little bit like yours, but a little bit different.
Yep.
I always thought we should use the ATM network as a potential voting booth. They exist. There's a massive infrastructure across the country. We run trillions of dollars over it virtually every single day.
Yep.
There are cameras on virtually every ATM machine.
Yep.
So you could actually have some kind of security if you thought people were double voting and doing other weird things. And lastly, what you could do, which I think would be very interesting, is actually offer every single person a paper receipt. Because the paper receipt could have a number on it, which then you could go check your own vote on the system afterwards. If you thought that the Russians were hacking the system, you could go see that your vote actually
So I
was
should
taken.
mention the system that we're building has a tracking number that every single voter gets when you
Great
submit
minds,
it, so you're
great
already
minds
ahead of your
think alike.
time.
Okay.
Look, I think that would be better than what we have right now, but I still worry, and I'm not worried about the presidential election, which probably doesn't ever need mobile voting, to be honest. They have plenty
Really?
of turnout. Yeah, because that's 60-something%
So that you
turnout.
don't think this really should be used for even the president? That's where everyone's head goes.
No, I'm worried. You know what city council primary turnout was here last year? Take a guess.
Next to nothing.
I would say
7.2%. Any of you could have won a city council seat with 7,000 votes in a primary. That's why our government is so screwed up, because people are so indebted to the extremes who bother to show up in that stuff. So, look, would more people vote in an ATM than a polling place? Perhaps. So that might be better if it could be secure. But would a lot more people, if they were while they're waiting for their coffee or they're sitting on the bus or whatever it is, if they could securely vote, could do it? And by the way, if you just told me we'll have mobile voting for state and local primaries, given how out of whack our state and local governments are, where they're so extremely held hostage to one side or the other, that would fix like 70%.
Can I ask you one other question? And it's good for democracy to have more people voting, you would argue.
Yes.
The costs, so I believe that our whole election systems are so corrupted by money.
Yep.
The cost of running an election for a city councilman, for example, I assume the number would become astronomical because all of a sudden you have to really reach. Look, you want to reach everybody. I'm not saying you don't. But I'm saying all of a sudden it changes the complete dynamic of the cost of these elections. No?
Yeah, sure, but again,
maybe that's a good thing.
You could have the cost of administering the election goes way down, right? So you could put that money into matching funds for campaign finance, or you could put spending caps on the race itself. Plus, also the cost of reaching people digitally is a fraction of what it is. If you want to advertise in this show right now, it's really expensive because you guys are reaching the whole world, right? Whereas if you want to just target one voter in one city council district, that's like fractions of a penny. Right. So I'm not sure that it really would be that expensive. And for governments, we've built this technology. I've paid for it out of my own pocket. It's free. We're just going to make it completely open source and available.
Right. Our viewers are very valuable.
That's why people pay the big bucks.
Yeah, are so high.
Absolutely. And I bet every one of your viewers right now has a smartphone. I bet 98% of them don't vote in state and local primaries, and I bet half of them probably would if they could do it easily and securely.
Bradley Tusk, thank you for making us think this morning.
Thanks for having me, guys.
That's the pod for today. Squawk Box is hosted by Joe Kernan, Becky Quick, and Andrew Ross Sorkin. Tune in weekday mornings on CNBC at 6 Eastern. To get the smartest takes and analysis from our TV show right into your ears, follow Squawk Pod wherever you get your podcasts. We'll meet you back here tomorrow.
We are clear. Thanks, guys.